everyone. So my name is Lena, and we are here to discuss and learn about vintage fashion with Terry Mesritz. She's an expert in vintage fashion. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here, and look forward to sharing a lot of things with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we start, I just quickly want to recap what Fashion Talks is about. So basically, we founded Fashion Talks CH last year in Geneva. It's a passion project to bring the community together, to network, learn, and also to have a good time. We highlight initiatives so fashion projects with values such as local, handmade, ethical, or environmentally conscious fashion. And one of our major points is to focus on bringing people to shops and to brands.
Yeah, and as physical retail has been suffering for some times, we wanted to bring people to brands in Geneva. So we do networking events at shops where people get to meet the founders and designers of brands, share their stories and pitch while shaving a glass of wine. And besides, we produce our own media, including articles, interviews, and online programs such as this online meeting. And we are happy to, we are planning, to extend to New York after Corona, when we can have physical events again. And we are happy to have you all with us today, especially thanks to you, Terry. And can you tell us more about yourself?
Okay, so about myself, I think fashion was my passion ever since I was a kid. You know, I remember I was drawing those, like, in those big white pages, full collections, you know. I don't think every kid does that, you know. It's like, and you make up your own name, which is ridiculous, but then, you know. And, you know, the more I grew up, the more I was drawn to old fashion, the clothes, the prints, the material, how to wear it, how to transform it. So, you know, I think after that, you know, I just went into studying stylisme, modelisme, haute couture. And then I was super lucky. I got accepted into Yves Saint Laurent haute couture as a trainee. That was still one of my fondest memories. Meeting Monsieur Saint Laurent himself, being there was just wow. And this is also where I met Rachel Zebar, who is now a famous vintage seller in LA. And, you know, this is where we really gave in to the joy of vintage, as well as new collection that was happening at Saint Laurent itself. You know, you discover the archives, you dwell into the past of the house, and this is amazing.
Yeah, I am actually very inspired by Saint Laurent, like the Mondrian dress, and it's just he's so iconic and also was a revolutionary. So it's great that you work with them. Amazing.
And a very gentle person, you know. I've been in quite a few fashion houses to know the atmosphere. And believe you me, at Saint Laurent, there was an atmosphere of silence, of calm. There was no shouting, no hysterical. You know, it was very respectful. And I think it's now lacking in the fashion world is that respect, you know, and that kind of, you know, that air of calm and luxury and very solemnity. It was solemn. Yeah.
Interesting. So, and what drove you to vintage fashion?
Well, also, yeah, the fact that we were in Paris, we were in our 20s in Paris, and so, you know, you discovered the archives of Yves Saint Laurent, and my job was to decline this haute couture into prêt-à-porter. So you kind of need, you know, you have a haute couture thing, and you're like, okay, what did he do that relates to that? And so you go into the archives and you just look at everything. So that's great, because you dwell, you know, you dive into the past. And then at Lasage, because after that I worked for Lasage, the haute couture embroiderer, and that was even better because I had to create jewelry collections. So I was free to go in the grenier, in the attics. It was the old offices at Rue Grange Batelière, because now Chanel has bought them over, so it's not the same place at all. So we're talking about an old building with old attics full of small, you know, casiers. And I would just open one and have the sample of Farah Diba's coronation dress, so then Jackie Kennedy's cocktail dress. So you go, I even have shivers when I talk about goosebumps. And so I would discover those entire cases of jet, of beads. So of course you're drawn into vintage. It's like a natural step to go from, actual fashion to vintage, because vintage is the basis of everything. I always say something: to know where you're going, you need to know where you come from.
Yeah.
And if you want to be in fashion, want to create fashion, you kind of need to know where it comes from, So voila. So this is pretty much where I got the bug. The vintage bug was there, and doing the puce, doing all the famous secondhand store, the Trois Marches. Those places were not cool at the time. They were a bit smelly. They were a bit shady and smelly, and you wouldn't find all that great stuff, but you would find stuff. Yeah, absolutely, you would find stuff.
It's interesting because I think in those times, vintage fashion didn't really exist for them. It's something so peculiar and particular to our age. And coming back to Lasage, I think it's also very interesting that you work for them. A lot of mainstream people don't know about Lasage, but they are like the king of embroidery and haute couture embroidery. It's amazing.
I have an anecdote. From him. Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, it's a little bit breaking, but we could. Yeah.
So one day, Yves Saint Laurent called and said to Monsieur Lesage, he said, "Well, I want a reflection in a window of a rainy day in Paris, and the how do you say les toits, the top of the house, the roofs of Paris. Imagine that." And so Jean-François Lesage had to come up with something like the rainy day on the roofs of Paris, and you have to present the whole thing. That was his art, to just go from one sentence to something absolutely amazing. So voila.
Very interesting. And what is vintage fashion?
Vintage fashion. So I think we need to differentiate quite a few things. There's costume. Costume for me is more like, the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. Unless you're in burlesque, unless you're completely living your everyday life in a time, parallel time universe, you have to be actual, you have to be modern. Every girl wants to be vintage, but wants to be modern. So from the 20s to the 40s, I would say really it kind of belongs in a museum. It kind of belongs, who's going to wear a bartailleur to go out, to be honest. So and the cloth also as a test, as the time, I remember at an auction, we bought a 20s flapper dress. It was literally falling apart. So basically we had to completely redo it to put it somewhere on exhibition, and it could not be worn because if you wear it, it just would fall apart. So, I'm like, if you buy something like this, that's that old, donate it to a museum, donate it to somebody who will take good care of it, because, it would be a shame. And then we entered the world of vintage really as such from the 50s to the 90s now. I don't know. People wonder, like, when does vintage, where does it end? When is something not vintage? I don't have an answer to that question. For me, something vintage could also be from a Prada collection 10 years ago. It could be a runway piece. It could be Tom Ford, Gucci, Saint Laurent. For me, now that has become vintage. It's a personal take on it. I do think, and then within vintage, there's the runway pieces, which are iconic, really iconic, because not all of Yves Saint Laurent was good, let me tell you. Part of Yves Saint Laurent was absolutely horrible. Nobody talks about it now, but to be honest, the Variation collection was an absolutely horrendous thing that nobody wants to hear about, nobody wants to wear it, and I doubt it will ever be worth anything, because nobody wants to go around with a jacket that has, that shoulders up to here and is like large, and the dress, nothing was very flattering. So, yeah, vintage, there's bad vintage, there's good vintage, there's iconic vintage, and there is runway vintage, and then there is secondhand, and all of that is secondhand, but secondhand can also be nothing, it just needs to be coming from somebody's wardrobe. Mm-hmm. So that for me, that is vintage.
Okay, interesting.
It can also come from a small seamstress in the 50s and the 60s. I don't really care that there's a brand on it, Some things can be really beautiful. It doesn't have to be Saint Laurent, But some pieces are just superb, because remember that at that time the ladies were wearing made to measure. So the stitching was great, the materials were great, and it was accessible.
Yeah. So I was actually thinking when you were saying that they're closer to too old to be considered vintage. So I understand at one point is because of the style themselves, but also maybe do the materials, how do you say, like decompose after some time, because it's natural. So I would think that happens too.
Unfortunately, I mean, they do last a very long time. I mean, I check, some pieces that I have from the 60s, they're literally indestructible, but make it 80 years. I think that 80 to 100 years is a time when, the material starts to shred apart. And yeah, you're going to have some issues at some stage, depending on the material, obviously. But yes, of course, you're going to have some problems after a certain time. It's like fur. Fur doesn't remain, Fur is like skin, so it's going to deteriorate at some stage. Silk also at some stage will fall apart. It's kind of a miracle if it doesn't. But vintage is much more resistant than anything else I know. Mm-hmm. Having said that,
Yeah. Actually, some dresses has to be, like, if I'm not mistaken, into there is some luxury brands who keep the dresses in a special like room with to keep like humidity, like temperature to
At the Met Museum, especially, they keep everything in super high-end storage with low temperature, wrapped. But then vintage tends. I don't know if you want to talk about what I have. You'll tell me when you want to talk about what I have behind me, because this is the moment.
Yeah.
This is Saint Laurent 70. Wow. This is also Saint Laurent, the velvet skirt. I mismatched. This is a shirt that goes with the smoking Saint Laurent of the early 80s. And with the velvet skirt, with the velvet bow, because I thought it would be an interesting way to wear it now. This is a clutch from the 80s as well. There's a famous Saint Laurent clutch. This is a full look from early 70. I think I sent you the picture of that, the two looks. It's 72, I think. And it's pristine. It hasn't moved, nothing. It's as if it came out of the store, as if it came out of the, it's crazy. And this is a Saint Laurent dress. This is not vintage, it's from Net-a-Porter. But maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But this is the famous Saint Laurent print that has been used, that's been reissued over the years. Tom Ford used it when he came to Saint Laurent, and it's reissued constantly. And the necklace is from early 80s as well. So, you can really break down things and match, and mix them. And we're also thinking about this article, maybe not to, of course, we'll sell it as it is. We wanted to show you the full 70s look, but I wouldn't wear it like that. I think it looks too fuddy-duddy, for nowadays.
Yeah, but
really good.
But the pieces, they can totally pass for modern and today's fashion. So it's really cool, and especially how like the famous smoking of Yves Saint Laurent is how like timeless. It's definitely forever.
There's many types of Saint Laurent smoking and the black tie, and I have to say some of them are a bit difficult to wear now. The one that goes with that shirt it would look awesome, but you need to wear the pants with like a very skimpy, transparent top, and the jacket looks a bit bulky, so you have to be very careful. It's like a tuxedo, it's like short. So he has issued so many of them. It's hard to find the timeless one, Not all of them are outstanding. Some of them were not so good, and some are amazing.
Yeah. Okay. So are you basically selling these, or are they for like an exhibition or for other reason?
No, I'm going to sell them. Right now I'm shooting them to make Instagram contact. We have a great project for this year to launch a website it's going to be for Swiss sellers, for Swiss buyers, but also, for the rest of the world. But essentially, we want to connect vintage professionals and bring them together and launch it with a great collection. This is a vintage collection from a lady. We're expecting a couple more of them. Another lady has a lot of Chanel, so that's great. Great compliment, very complimentary. And so, yes, right now we're shooting all of this, and we're finding, we're working really hard on launching this as fast as we can. But we'll let you know, definitely. And it's going to be first on Instagram, and then followed by an e-commerce. Just, we're not sure yet. We'll let you know. We're doing our best.
Exciting. It's very good to know that you're actually working on something that's going to be vintage for Switzerland. It's a great initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So moving on to more like the sustainable direction, vintage fashion is considered to be sustainable. So what are the main benefits of vintage clothes?
I think it's a great very vague. This is what it is. I think
there is just a problem with the microphone. We can't hear you well.
Is that now? It's okay. Is that okay now?
Yeah, it's okay now.
Yeah.
Good.
Great.
Okay. So sustainability in vintage, that's a great point. Vintage is intrinsic to being sustainable because, you just give something a second life. So in itself, this is great. You can just alter it. You can change it to fit you. You can, it's just a piece that's been sitting around and is not used, or will the money of the sale will benefit to somebody. So it's great. It's, in itself, it is sustainable. And I really encourage it because nothing should be gone lost, I think it's a great sign of having personal style, of being a refined person. And nothing can replace, an amazing Valentino couture gown from the 60s, It's a sign of being unique. It's a sign of knowing your style. It's a sign of respecting the past. And I do think that is, it just brings out a lot of new information to people. There's always going to be somebody who comes up to you and says, oh my God, I love your coat. I go like, oh yes, it's Courage from the 60s. And then boom, you talk to somebody and that person will know about it. Be like, oh really, I didn't know. And then they're going to start, being interested in that. And I think that matters very much.
Yeah, it's definitely also a conversation starter. And
yeah. Oof, yeah. Okay, totally. Especially a lady, women who have or men who have a sense of style and of the very refined something will immediately spot you in a room. If you have some beautiful vintage on, they're going to be like, oh my God, what is she wearing, And actually, I got a job because I was wearing a vintage coat.
Wow.
I arrived at my Lasage interview with an orange, like 60s coat from my mother with like a, the pie, as you say, colpe la tarte like this. And I'd like belted it and super high heels, like platform. And he was like, oh my God, she's wearing that orange vintage coat. That girl needs to be here. So, it can tell a lot about yourself. It's a sign of being unique, and not just wearing whatever fast fashion is launching this year.
Yeah. And knowledgeable. Yeah. And knowledgeable also. Yeah. Like you know what you're doing. When you're wearing vintage, you know what you're doing.
Of course.
I think it's also important that like consumers, basically they shouldn't really purchase non-renewable clothes anymore. So that way there would be less waste.
I don't know about you guys, but during this confinement, I've changed completely my consuming habits. Well, I put a lot of money aside to start with. I completely stopped buying for 2 months, completely. Not even on the... I thought it was not responsible to go buy stuff online where, everybody was like overworked. I was like, come on, let's not. And I was thinking I am not going to buy again the Zara dress, the H&M, whatever. I'm sorry, I'm naming them. I don't know if I can.
That's fine.
Sorry. So because I was like, okay, as long as it's always cool to get in and just buy the latest little fad, I said, okay, I'm not doing this anymore. Of course, you can buy your sweater and your socks at H&M, of course. I mean, it's not. The point is not to go in buying the latest thing that you will throw away after 6 months.
Yeah.
Learn to read what's written on the etiquette. I think you need to know who does what is the cost, the human cost of what you're wearing. How long is it going to last? Not long, because you tend to throw it away. It takes a lot to recycle it.
Yeah.
And I decided to help out, be more, raise more awareness with my friends who have little stores here in Geneva. I know we discussed it with you guys. And I really hope we're going to do this to help them promote what they do. And yes, it's slightly more expensive, but I'd rather put like 180 francs into a sustainable dress from an honest designer than 100, because now it's 100. You buy a good special collection H&M, it's 100 almost. Then doing that. For me, it's like now a choice I'm going to respect, and I'm seeing the windows, and I'm like, I'm not even looking. I'm like, fine, I'm not looking. They don't exist.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and especially because these fast fashion brands, basically, it's not just about that they don't treat people well, the environment well. It's also about that those clothes will basically fall apart. Nobody will ever repair those clothes because they are fads. They fall apart, so they're just going to be thrown out. So nobody will repair or donate. So they don't have a cycle. Yeah. Oh, okay. Sound.
Yeah.
Sound. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's okay again. Yeah. Okay.
Feels like a scene. It feels like so. So, I have questions that you would like. I'm checking my notes. There's something I want to talk about.
Yes, there is. Stuart's going to say something. Just waiting on him.
And,
okay.
Yeah. And if someone, for example, is new to vintage shopping, how do they start?
Okay, that's a great question. You need to know your style. You need to know your body shape. You need to know your style. I'm glad to advise anybody. They come to me saying, Terry, what should I wear? I will, in an hour, that person will leave my showroom knowing exactly what suits them or not. And it's you need to ask. There's many great vintage places here in Geneva. I work with them, so I'm not the only one. There's many of us. We're usually friends. And you should, keep a good contact with those people and say, this is my budget. This is what I'm looking for. What fits me? Go try things. It's important to know what fits you. Do prints fit you or not prints, or what kind of material? That's very important. And you should ask your sellers, definitely. We're there to help you, we're there to style you. We're not just here to sell stuff. It really is a matter of, we want a person to go out in the world looking amazing. This is really our point, it's being aesthetic, being refined. So the person should just start with that, very simply. And then what else would I want to tell you? Yes, and try to buy things that you will keep for a long time. My cherished vintage, or like Valentino 60s long black dresses and chiffon, those are timeless. You will wear them at any age, any time, any timeless stuff. My Courage coats, timeless. Every person has its timeless item. So think about that. Think that you're going to keep that thing for a long time, So you need to have that one amazing black coat, that one amazing cocktail dress. And you can wear it over and over again throughout the years. That's very important.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what else? That's it. I wanted to talk a little bit. It's funny because we talked about the Chanel jacket lately.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at how out of 10 Chanel jackets, literally 7 of them are pretty bad. And when I say pretty bad, it's pretty bad.
These days, like the present jackets that they have, or before?
Oh, well, I think the haute couture ones are very unpractical. They're super heavy. They're like, poof, and they were made for one person, to be. So if you're like that exact frame, it's great, but they're sort of, it lacks flexibility here. It's heavy. And the new ones, because, people bring me a lot of Chanel, but I'm amazed at some collections are just horrible. And there's this whole myth about the Chanel jacket. And what I want to say is when you buy one, buy a really nice one. Don't just buy the Chanel, the jacket of the season. Try to really find a good one because there are, but not all of them, I'm really much amazed at that.
Yeah. I think it's important to explain to, maybe not everybody knows that Chanel jackets could be heavy because of the chain inside, right? That holds it down. Yeah.
Yeah. But the new ones are okay. But they are heavy, They are. I have one, it's pretty heavy. It's like almost like a coat because it's so heavy. Yeah.
So does the age make any difference from reselling point of view, of price point of view?
Not really. I think what matters is the iconicity, if you will, of the piece. It's what collection does it belong to, and that has nothing really to do with age. It has to do with that specific collection. I do think that it's personal liking. I think anything Tom Ford ever did, I am in love with. So for me, there's Gucci collections, there's Saint Laurent collections, and then you have, of course, the iconic fashion. But there's also like Lanvin did some lame dresses that are absolutely amazing. It's also a matter when you see a piece, you're like, wow. There's the wow factor. It's not really age, Then Halston would disappear. There's not much Halston stock left in this world. So this is also when you find a very good Halston, you're super happy, It's like, woo-ha. And voila. So no, for me, it's not a matter of age. It's related to that piece, that collection, simply.
Yeah. Interesting. So it's not even about the designer, it's about the hotness of the collection of that designer, basically.
Yeah. It's about his iconic collection. It's about, that moment when you were like, oh my God, this is a moment where something changed completely and everybody remembers that collection. It's very visual. And usually those pieces tend to be pretty timeless, If you look back, you're like, oh my God, I could wear this tomorrow. I could wear this now. And timelessness is very important in vintage.
Absolutely.
And if it is a designer label, how can we guarantee authenticity? Sorry.
Okay, so authenticity, well, there's the label to start with. The label, I mean, we all have, we know where to go. We know when labels change, so we can already evaluate. The 70s, we know that the label of Saint Laurent looked like that, or Dior looked like that, and then when did it change? So that's already one thing. Then you can always find, you see, for example, I'm going to show you. Here I have l'officiel, and as you can see, I have little, so this is all couture, and I can find a piece in there, or at least I can find the style it refers to. Then you can't see, but behind me I have a whole bunch of books with all the collection, with all the Yves Saint Laurent referrals, with not just Yves Saint Laurent, so many more of them. So this is, if you really have a doubt, that's where you go look into. And then the quality is intrinsic to authenticity, Bad stitching doesn't exist in great vintage, The material will speak for itself, the stitching will speak for itself. It's like bags pretty much. Bad leather and bad stitching, well, yeah, it's going to be fake, obviously,
We can maybe it's still possible going at boutique to check with the sellers, maybe if it's possible to guarantee that it's a real one.
Well, with clothes, it's as much easier than with handbags. Much easier to authenticate. You can always, you see, I came up, a client gave me an amazing Yves Saint Laurent fully embroidered by Lasage. So I had a bit of trouble finding information on it, even though it was haute couture and numbered. So I just asked the Musée Saint Laurent, the Fondation Yves Saint Laurent, and they provided me with a bunch of information. So with an important piece, you can always do that. They will always be happy to answer you. Other than that, if you have trouble, well, it depends where you bought it from, you know. If you bought it from a vintage store, I always consider what my clients come back to tell me, and I reassure them. But then, you know, fakes are just kind of rare in the clothing, you know. Doesn't happen. It's the bags. The bags are the big problems.
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that they basically helped you to know more, because I'm interested, how do brands that are still around react to the vintage being resold? Is it something encouraged, or?
Oh yes, they like it. I mean, so people like Yves Saint Laurent, I mean, I know because I speak of them a lot because I'm still very much in touch with them, so I know them well for that. I do think that many brands are very proud of their past, and they usually now have, like Gucci now has their foundation and their museum, and so they usually would either be interested, if it's like an amazing piece, they will be interested in selling it, in buying them for themselves, or they would at least give you a hint of what it is. And I mean, I thought Yves Saint Laurent was super responsive and extremely kind. Gucci never really answered. I had a query at the time, but no, they were not very responsive. It depends on their attitude towards it, but I would say most of them, yeah, they have a great respect for their house, you know, for what they've done. I can't speak for anybody else because I do not know. But yeah, Dior too would be responsive. I imagine they would be, you know, but I don't know about the others. Actually, it would be nice to have a discussion with other sellers to know which are the houses that are responsive to it, you know. And
yeah, I think it's an important point.
Yeah.
So regarding the sizing, is there a difference between vintage sizing and modern sizing?
What is now at 36 used to be a 38, so we've gone one size down. You know what I mean? Like, I think that was a 34, and it's now would be considered a 32 probably. So you know, and this was a 38, and that would be considered a 36. So yeah, it's gone down one size. I don't know. Clients want to feel better about this, you know. I don't know. It's weird. All the sizing has reduced. You know, like now there's like 00. Whoever knew there was 00? Come on, you know. It's like, it's crazy. I mean, I understand you're petite, but you know, it has become like a norm, and I don't think it's the norm. You know, it's rare to be that tiny. You know.
Yeah. So, it's trendy to be thin, I guess. That's
ultra thin. So yeah. And what else? And you can always alter, you know, your things. That's great. You can jacket. You see this jacket, you would have a hard time altering it because jacket is such tailoring put into it that, you know, trying to change something about it is going to be very difficult. But you could alter that skirt. That would be easy. You could alter that shirt. Needs to be altered because, you know, I tucked it in, but it's very large. It's wide. It's 80s wide, you know, and the sleeves also would need to be, you know, made slimmer for an actual look. And that you can alter too, you know. I would not alter jackets, tailored jackets and coats. No, that's not.
So usually made for thin people.
It was made to measure, you know. It was made to measure. You had the haute couture clients. Some of them were pretty big. Some of them were super thin. And, you know, that's what it is. They had their own mannequin. They would, I remember, you had their own, you know, with their names on them. And they would pad the mannequin to make the exact form of the client. So she would only have to come for a couple of fittings. And some of them were pretty big. Yeah, definitely. But, yeah.
Actually, Joris is also doing tailoring or done tailoring before. So, uh, yeah, it would be. What do you think? Would it be possible to tailor that smocking, make it different, or?
Well, there is everything is possible. I mean, in tailoring, you can do almost what you want, what you like, what you love, what you want to wear. So everything is possible, of course. Yeah, definitely.
I
So
agree. Things possible, but in truth of the matter is, do you want to destroy the harmony of that jacket to turn it? Yeah, then you put a lot of money into turning
of
it into
course,
something else.
yeah,
Me, it's just the girl who's like, "Ooh, I'd like it a bit more like this and like that." I'm like, listen, if you're 40 and it's a 34, I don't think it's gonna work.
Yeah.
There's so much you can do. But yes, I agree with you. Other than that, we can deconstruct something and make it something complete. What are you doing? Are you actually doing the tailoring yourself?
No, not me. I'm not sewing. I'm not sewing. No, I'm taking measures and we choose with with the client the fabric, the buttons, and all. So
That's
yes,
fabulous. And there's so many great details that people don't know. You see, for example, here, the little holes here, it's called a Milanese, and it's
yes,
made by hand. I learned how to make, it's probably the only thing I could sew, because I was very bad at that. But it's fascinating. People don't know that this is strictly made by hand, It's like no machine will do it. It's silk thread and blah, blah, blah. So, a lot of fascinating details in tailoring.
yeah, really beautiful actually. A Milanese, yeah.
Well,
It's a
Yeah,
detail, yeah.
it's a beautiful detail, though, because
Yeah,
every time
of course.
I get a beautiful Milanese, I know it's been made by hand, That
yeah,
for me is the whole difference also.
yeah.
Definitely.
I think it's also good that this way we can also tell people. A lot of people have no idea of how much work goes into one piece. So by talking about it, we also promote that so people understand it.
I agree. You need to, I think now the world needs to differentiate who goes to a specific, how do you say, an usine, a fabric that is nice to its employees. I know one of my friends has, a fabric in India. It's a very good fabric. They treat super well their employees, and it's one of the best fabrics in India for silk or cashmere. I can't remember. This is important. I want to know that, to know that it's not an underpaid kid in Bangladesh, and I want to know that that person has the skill. And I think all of those things matter very much now, because we might want to keep our things a bit longer.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
true.
and there is this notion that vintage fabrics were made to be more durable and of better quality.
Absolutely. Oh, no, they do. They do. They definitely are. That I can vouch for that. For me, it's a fact. It's an absolute fact. Some of them indestructible, literally.
Yeah.
Look at this. I mean, if you can see it from close, it literally looks like nobody has ever worn it, and it's like straight out of the makers, So, and this is what? It's from the 70s, so it's 50 years old.
So do you know if it was actually worn? So do you know the person who
Yes,
read it?
yes, it's a lady I know, and she has given me to estimate, to expertise her entire collection. So I have that's what I do. I usually take entire collections from one person, who at some stage are like, okay, I am emptying 30 years of my life, and they like to let it go in one go, one place, one person. And I feel very proud to be picked, for that. And also because they know that I love that. So, I'm not like, oh yeah, whatever, let's just sell it. I'm like, no, let's see, what goes with what. Let's restyle it. Let's change it. Let's make it actual. Let's make it so a girl is going to want to wear it, and it's and they're beautiful things, you can really see, the person, you can see their taste. And then, for the photo shoots, I need to find a young lady that's going to look like her at the time. So, this whole process going with that, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, truly. So what is your opinion? Like, what era has some of the best clothing that can be still used today?
I think definitely the 60s, the 70s,
Mhm.
because it has that Studio 54 appeal. Who doesn't want to be Studio 54, Lame, Bianca Yeager looking? Come on, this is like, everybody loves that. You have the Paco Rabanne metal, you have the Courage look, futuristic look that it's still on vogue nowadays. You have all that Lame, that Lanvin, Lame. Oh, come on, it still is so actual, so sexy, so feminine. And it's sexy. Who doesn't want to be sexy? So I do think for me, it's the 60s, late 60s, 70s, the disco years are very, very rich in great looks.
Yeah, it was about ecstasy and excess. So definitely, and Studio 54 is basically, that was the place where was the hottest parties, right? The
Yes.
hottest, best parties.
Yeah. The place where everybody would mingle. And it was a crazy place. From if you read about it, it would be interesting to have one day to have a talk about it and just put facts together about that mythical place, because it was absolutely insane, apparently.
Okay. That's so cool.
But first, let's pick a fine first.
Well, are they still around, by the way? Are they still around, or?
No.
No.
Unfortunately, it's gone, and we will all be arrested. No, it's gone, unfortunately. Well, look, now we can't even meet. I mean, I'm having a cocktail party next week. I don't even know, am I allowed to? I don't even know. Like, now we're like, not 5, but we're like 10. So I'm like, are the cops going to knock at my door, downstairs at my showroom and be like, no, madame, you cannot. I have no idea. So, let's take things one day at a time.
Yeah.
Voilà.
Great. And if we find an amazing vintage piece and actually doesn't fit?
Well, as I said before, it depends on what it is. If it's that in 34 and you're 40, I would advise you to let go, to just, give it, sell it back, or do something. If it's the other way around, is always possible. The more you have flowy chiffon, flowy silk, the easier it is to reduce it, because you have a lot of flowiness to work with. So you can really, change something with that. As the more it's tailored, the harder it will be, and the more expensive it will be. But you can always do it, of course. I would just advise people over a size and a half. I mean, it's getting difficult, but you never know. It depends on the item. You should always ask an expert. Ask the person, what do you think? You should have a good seamstress. That's the first step.
And asking a tailor, maybe.
Oh yeah, I mean, obviously. A
good one, actually, for this kind of piece, and any good pieces, I mean.
That I would go to a tailor, and for that I would go to a seamstress. You know what I mean? That's the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So we know that you specialize in clothing, but you have a little bit. I mean, you actually have extensive knowledge about gemstones as well. But let's talk a little bit about vintage jewelry.
Yeah.
So does vintage fine jewelry come with the standard authentication and grading report, or how do we know what it is?
Usually what we do, my best, I'm a GIA, I'm a gemologist, so I know to expertise this, so this is your best friend, the loop. And you check for all the poinçons, for the little, I am not an expert. I mean, I am an expert in stones. So I'm going to check the poinçons. I don't know how you call poinçons in English. I'm going to check for those. I'm going to see if I can, find what it is. But usually I can tell it's real, it's gold, it's white gold, it's platinum. That much I can say. I can identify the stones, and I can say they're absolutely true stones, that it's not half plastic, half God knows what. And then I'm going to put a price on it. But some stones will have a GIA grading report from another lab. You're going to get a drawing of the diamond or of the stone with its inclusions and the grading. But that people won't come to me for that. It's too high end for me. I'm going to stop at 10,000, sometimes I have collections of jewelry that come my way. I would usually go to Sotheby's and ask them for advice. I would ask a friend jeweler for advice. And I would maybe tell my client, listen, this is a bit too much for me. It's not my clients. So you're going to, it's a waste of time. Go to them because that's where you have your niche, Yeah. So, yeah, that's what I do.
Okay. And what is the most interesting vintage item you have purchased or sold?
Oh my God, so many of them. It's hard for me to answer that because I don't ever look back. I never think about what I've sold because it's sold is sold. Goodbye. Next. What have I bought this year that was super interesting? Actually, there's something I can show you. Can I?
Yeah,
Of course. Hi everyone. So, yeah.
This is a Gucci vintage clutch.
Mm-hmm.
My mother has the same, and I adore it. And since I never wanted to give it away or anything, I saw one passing on auction, so I bought it.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
It is a work of art. Yeah. I'd rather only have like 3 clutches, like a gold, a black, and this, than 10. You know what I mean? And this is there's a strass in it. See, I'm gonna have to have this. But and this is like a Gucci 60s clutch. It's rare to find them on auction or anywhere. And to me, that's a work of art. I mean, it's like you wear this with a black dress, and then you look $1 billion.
Yeah, it's amazing. Very, very nice looking. Yeah?
Sorry. No, this every year we find all those amazing things, and we buy them on auctions, or we buy them from a client, and there's so many of them. There's I don't know, I bought an Hermes coat all in suede and castor this year. Absolutely amazing. It's collections that Hermes used to do with a Scandinavian store, unique collaborations. Those are interesting pieces because they tell a story,
And you also mentioned the Crocodile Kelly bag.
Yes.
That's very impressive.
I'm so not fascinated by Hermes bags. One, I'm not a client. 2, I love Chanel. I don't like Hermes. Hermes doesn't fit me. It doesn't look good on me. I like them, but not that much. You know what I mean? It's
right.
Hermes crocodile bag. Yes, it was a quick sale, and I wasn't. Yeah, I'm not fascinated by them because you open first dibs. You open any. Everybody's like, oh, do you have an Hermes bag? As if the world would revolve around Hermes bags. No, it doesn't, Yeah. So I'm a bit tired of them. Yeah. I mean, I love Constance. Oh, actually, I sold 2 crocodile bags. I sold a Constance black crocodile, which was very hard to sell. And I bought, there's this Kelly and brown crocodile too. Yeah, I did that, but I'm not overly. It's not bags is not my main.
I understand. I think from a business perspective, it's a pretty big thing because the value is getting like just higher and higher the more like older you are.
It is insane. The value of a Constance bag has gone up. I mean, literally 15 years ago, it was 1,000 and something. Now it's 7,000.
Yeah.
So people say it's an investment. I'm like, well, I'm not that sure. What do you mean? It's kind of, if you buy it now at 7,000, I mean, are we going to sell it back in 10 years at 14,000? I'm not sure about that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, we know that there's basically Hermes bag, the Birkin bag is the most expensive bag ever sold. So like, I think it was like 3 years ago that Christie sold it for over, there was like a bag with like a lot of like diamonds and more than 200 diamonds.
It's the Niloticus sombre. It's the one that's like white and beige. So that's already a crocodile that comes in ombre, with the diamond lacquer. It's a super Kardashian bag. Yeah, I know.
Absolutely. Like I wouldn't wear it honestly. Like I mean, but I understand extreme value of it, and the hype. I mean, I don't understand that much the hype around it, because it has to do with the supply, right? That it's like the demand is much larger than the supply, or.
And I think that is fake, because, you know, so if you're a very good Hermes client, even here in Geneva, and you order something, you're going to get it. Last year, I met somebody from very in the high spheres of Hermes, and he was like, that's bullshit. You're going to get your bag in 4 months tops if you're a good client. And I was like, yeah. So that's a bit of a, you know, a myth. And then, you know, there's also the fact that super high-end clients like the Kardashians, like Mrs. Jenner, they're going to get whatever they want, like, immediately. So if you're that rich, yeah, I don't know who buys. Because if you're that kind of client, well, you should have your bag. They won't make you wait. So I don't understand what's the whole story in this thing. I don't know. There's something weird, because there's a lot of myth about Hermes, but you do get your bags. So, yeah, I don't understand this whole buying, selling at that price. I find it a bit ridiculous. But then again, it's not my field. It's really not my field. I don't enjoy working with bags, not that much.
Yeah, your expertise is clothing. Yeah, it's interesting what they are doing, definitely. Yeah, so so thank you, Terry, and we are really looking forward to seeing what's next for you with this exciting new project.
I'll definitely keep you posted. I want to thank you guys for taking this time with me, and it was my first time, so please all be nice. It was a bit
great. Honestly, it's very great, and thank you for your insight. We learned a lot. Yeah.
Anytime. I'll be back whenever you want, and I'll be glad to give some more inputs and insights. If anybody out there needs advice, please do contact me. I'm on Instagram. I'm a public profile. Do not hesitate. I'm here to answer questions. Not a problem for me. So
we will share your Instagram profile in a post as well. Like, just write down the handle, and if people want to contact, for sure. So before saying bye, I wanted to just share that we have 2 more online meetings planned, and then after we will also launch something exciting that's still going to be online, because we have this Corona thing. So anyway, everyone stay tuned.
And and please share this meeting if you found it interesting, and follow us on @fashiontalks.ch on Instagram and Facebook, or on LinkedIn for more interesting content. And thank you, Terry. It was very interesting.
Thank you so much.
Doris.
Have a lovely evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.